This is the most bewildering news that I have read in 2020. And it's a news that has managed to baffle the entire medical scientific community as well. How should I present it to you? Imagine that you have a child and he happens to be the devil child. He keeps misbehaving. He does bad things, so he ends up in juvenile detention. And when the kid comes back home, he comes back home with titties. Like he's got these big plump tits. And you start to wonder what the hell. And as the parents do some digging, as they do some investigation, they found out that a doctor at the juvenile facility by the name of Wang decided to give the kid estrogen. Isn't this astonishing? Now, why did he give the kid estrogen? Well, because the kid was diagnosed, well, I would say misdiagnosed, with a disorder. The disorder is called oppositional defiant disorder. Now, the reason this is baffling people from the medical community is that this is a disorder that can only be given to children. It's a disorder where the child does not want to respect any type of authority, is at odds with everyone else, and it's not usually happening in kids. But if it's a teenager, you do not diagnose them with oppositional defiant disorder because every single teenager has oppositional defiant disorder. It is normal. It is not. When you were a teenager, for example, didn't you start backtalking against your parents? Didn't you started misbehaving at school? Every single teenager goes through this. It's a normal part of growing up, of sticking it to the man. So yes, for a 5-year-old that never listens to their parents, yeah, you can diagnose them with that. But for a 16-year-old, are you insane? Not to mention, like, every single 16-year-old that finds themselves in juvenile, then obviously they have a problem with listening to authority and following the man, right? But it's not only that. The treatment for oppositional defiant disorder is never estrogen. Never. Like, no one has ever suggested this. There is no medical books. There is no scientific research that you should give estrogen to a kid in order to cure them from oppositional deficit. What is happening in LA? What is happening? Because again, you need to understand why this is bewildering. This is not like some doctor doing an experiment in his basement. This is in an institution. Like, at an institution, the level of bureaucracy is insane. You can't just do this out of your asshole without anyone else noticing. So I assume that other people noticed, but they were afraid to speak out because they might have got fired. You know, like maybe this doctor is suffering from being ideologically possessed or something. It's really bewildering. And it's also quite upsetting because you find out that the kid was getting bullied by his cellmates as he developed tits. Imagine this, you know, like teenagers bullying someone else for something like that. What a bunch of regressive twats. You know, they weren't very progressive, forward-thinking individuals at that juvenile detention center. Now that he's out, he has to undergo surgery in order for the doctors to cut off those tits. And apparently his father says that his behavior has changed. He's like a different person. He just wants to be in his room and he don't come out for nothing all day in his room, the father said. He was never like that. Now, it's difficult to say if it's the estrogen therapy or spending some time in juvie might also do this to you. I mean, getting bullied by other kids and whatnot. But it's baffling. Like, what I find the most baffling is that we live in a world where if you say something racist 20 years ago, you automatically lose your job. There's no time limit to that. You know, you put on blackface 25 years ago, and it's found out today, you lose your job. But if you do a fuck up of this proportion that directly has to do with your job, like if this doctor did this shit to this patient, what else did he do? And he gets to maintain his job. Like he gets to remain in the position even though this is now a scandal and it's in the media and he's getting a lawsuit because of it, and other doctors are stepping up and they're saying that this is insanity. Not to mention, like, the reason it's insanity is because estrogen, like estrogen therapy, has numerous side effects. Like, we're talking about blood clots, we're talking about a higher chance of having a stroke. We're talking about the fact that if you pump a healthy male with estrogen, then it affects his fertility, like his sperm might lose quality, and it might be difficult for him to have children in the future. Not to mention, like, the ethical questions of this. The kid was in juvenile detention. Like, he couldn't consent to this treatment. He had to take. In fact, this is actually what happened. Like, the parents are upset that the doctor never consulted with the parents, and they just gave the kid pills, and he was forced to take it because, you know, he's a juvenile. And according to the kid, he was afraid that by not taking the treatment, it will affect his case. And it's a 16-year-old. What the fuck does he know? You know, like, of course you have to talk with the parents. And again, like, this raises questions like, what about the other patients? Like, did they consent? Did the doctor not talk with the parents? I mean, it's standard procedure. Standard procedure, if you have your, like, just because the kid is in juvie doesn't mean that the parents lose their ability to be asked whether or not they consent to a treatment done to their child. It's like, this is such a fucked up news anywhere you look at it. I legitimately don't know. A lot of people on Twitter are speculating that this might also be ideological to a certain degree. Like, there's this renowned feminist and professor, Christina Hofsommers, which has a theory, well, a book actually, where she points out how boys are treated as defective girls. And you get to see this with a lot of progressives thinking this. Like, when you look at the Gillette commercial, for example, it has like this sketch where two kids are rough playing in the grass. You know, they're tumbling and they're doing pretty much what I did when I was a kid, and probably every other guy did as a kid. And all the other adults are saying boys will be boys, and this is being viewed as evil, like rough playing. And the idea of boys will be boys is something that you say when your kid comes home covered in mud, or he got in a stick fight with a friend of his, and, you know, he slapped it over his arm, and the kid now cries or something like that. It's like, okay, yeah, boys will be boys. It's like they're playing a little bit rough. But that doesn't mean, like, if your kid comes home after gangbanging a colleague, and you're like, oh, yeah, boys will be boys. You know, no one thinks like that. But this is like the progressive mindset. They literally believe that it leads to a rape culture and toxic masculinity if you allow the boy to be a little bit more rough in the playground and to play some contact sports or to tumble or do some play fighting with their kids, which is something like we all did. And you look at schools and they're actually banning these sports. Like, there are schools that says, oh, we don't call it tug of war now, we call it tug of peace. Oh, we want to avoid all type of contact sports and whatnot. And I think this is harmful. You know, I legitimately think that they need to understand that, like, this ideology that men and women are 100% the same is bullshit. Like, men and women do have differences, not major, they're minor, but there are. And I think men and women are different. It's a good thing because they're supposed to complete each other. And you notice this in demographics, right? Like, certain things are marketed towards women, other things are marketed towards men. 50 Shades of Grey, for example, or Twilight, is something that mostly women like to watch. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, why should it be something wrong with that? Why does everything need to be for everyone? So no, it's like, I definitely disagree that you should treat boys as defective girls. And this seems to be one of these cases. Now, whether it or not is done ideologically, maybe the doctor was just trying to run some experiment, I don't know. But what I do know is that this doctor has violated all sorts of ethical codes, and he needs to be fired, and his license needs to be taken away. And he needs to be put under an investigation to see what else did he do. And also, who are his collaborators? Because again, this is an institution. It's not like he was running this by himself. There are other people. There is paperwork that's being filed. These people are placed under observation. So everyone that knew about it should now also be investigated and asked. It's like, okay, did you know about it? Why didn't you say anything? Were you afraid of losing your job, or were you collaborating with the guy? Or are you incompetent and you didn't even notice, even though you should? But I'm telling you this, I don't think that this is going to happen. I don't think that this is going to be the case because these people, from my personal experience, always covers each other's backs, and they're going to be happy with this doctor getting fired and all of the scandal going away. But I'm telling you what, if I was the parents, I would investigate this constantly. Like, I would hire a private investigator just to make sure that other kids don't suffer like this kid has suffered. Oh, and I find it interesting why the trans community isn't up in arms about this. Because their whole argument is that misgendering someone is the worst thing ever and you should respect how people identify. And clearly, this person identified as a man, and what the doctors did to him, giving him estrogen and making him grow tits, it's horrible, right? Like, why is the trans community up in arms and demanding this doctor gets fired? Very interesting question, isn't it? Let me know what you think in the comment section, and I will see you guys later.